was 22 years old when I came to prison.
I was 30 years old when I went to prison.
I was at the age of 19. I had just turned 19.
Hi, I'm Chris, and I help life-sentenced men transition from institutionalized prison life back into society. Every one of our men has already served 25 to 45 years in prison. I serve on the board of the Corrections Transition Program at Everglades Correctional Institution in Miami, Florida. I teach these men life skills and how to speak, listen, and think, so when they get parole, they become assets to their communities rather than liabilities of the state. Welcome to Men Going Home. I'm Chris Wolfe, and we've got another great show for you today because we are the only show that brings you access to a segment of society very few people know anything about. Men who have spent more than 30, 35, and even 40 years in prison. We'll talk to them about their crimes, their life in prison, and what their transition back into the free world was like after all those years. Now, before we welcome our special guest, please welcome my very good friend and co-host of this show, Andy Corge. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be here and very eager to meet Kacey and find out a little bit about her story.
Yeah. What'd you think of last week's show? We had Freddie Morales, who spent 30 years in prison without the possibility of parole. And then it turns out that his prosecutor or his defender, his attorney, never presented him with a 30-year plea deal. And he didn't find out about that for 30 years.
Yeah, Freddie was an amazing case to me, and it was incredibly compelling, that story. I mean, he really had no chance from the beginning, no guidance, started experimenting with marijuana at the age of 7, alcohol at the age of 8.
Yeah.
He really had no guidance. And it was really to me, the most amazing redemption and a renaissance of a person that I've seen in the shows that we've done here in Men Going Home.
Right. He went to prison thinking he was in for the rest of his life on 3 life sentences. And about the age of 24, he realized that this is not the life he wanted to live. He was very fortunate because life without the possibility of parole required some kind of divine intervention, and he did get it.
He did. And the other thing that came out of that show, a couple other things real quickly. Number one, that law in the state of Florida, that crime he committed that he got his 3 life sentences, if he had committed murder in the course of that crime, he would have been eligible for parole. Fortunately, in the state of Florida, we've changed that law, right, and now that doesn't exist, but he was not eligible for parole. And if he had committed a murder at the time of the crime, he would have been. It was bizarre to me at best.
Absolutely. All right. Let's introduce today's special guest. Today's special guest is much better looking than any of our previous guests because she is a friend of our show and went to prison in 2010 for grand theft and forgery. She has survived many years of drug and alcohol abuse and is very fortunate to have survived. Kacey is very open, honest, and insightful, and she is here today to tell her story. Please welcome our friend, Kacey Elder. Welcome to the show, Kacey.
Good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Thank you for having me.
Kacey, you grew up in Lakeland, Florida. What was that like back in 1982 when you were born?
It was like, I think for anyone else in 1982, it was, a lot more free going, what I'm saying? You had a lot more free time. Parents weren't on your back as much. There wasn't, here and there to go. So,
that's the headquarters of Publix, right?
My parents weren't really around though. So.
But isn't Lakeland the headquarters of Publix? You have a brother that works at Publix?
I do. Yeah.
Now tell us about your parents. Your father is very interesting. Your father was a freelance photographer, had some pretty big name clients such as Reebok and Nike. And your mother was a model, correct?
Yes.
Right.
She was actually model of the year in 1981. I believe she was like 3 months pregnant with me at the time.
So you grew up in a relatively affluent family. I think your parents made good money. You said they were making about $250,000 a year back then?
Until about 1985 when they lost everything.
In 1985, they lost everything. Mm-hmm. Why did they lose everything?
To their own abuse of drugs and alcohol. And
Well, that's very
scandalous
interesting
things.
because you did mention, you remember them not only using drugs, but selling drugs. Talk about that.
Yeah, my dad, well, because my dad was a photographer and it was for, like the swimsuits, Reebok, Nike. There was a lot of women coming in and out of the house. And with that lifestyle, it's a very fast lifestyles. And there's people are wanting to stay skinny and work long hours and go to all the parties. So that requires a little bit of extra. And then there's all the extracurriculars that go along with that. I'm talking about drugs. I'm using slang for drugs. I'm sorry. So yeah, it was a lot of people just coming in and out, is what I remember. A lot of parties.
You said, I think your parents had a relatively volatile relationship.
Very.
You said your father had violent outbursts.
In 1983, my father got into a really head-on collision where the other person had died actually in the accident. He went through the windshield, and the force, his body actually bent the steering wheel forward. And I remember he never went to the hospital. He came straight home, and I remember picking glass out of the front of his skull. I was 3 years old at the time. And anyways, after that, he had what's known as like fits of rage, uncontrollable rage disorder, I believe it was called. And it was from frontal temporal lobe damage.
And then he ultimately died at a young age, 2008. He couldn't have been, what, about 40 years old?
He was 54.
He was 54. He died. How did he die?
A congestive heart failure.
And your mother's still
From
alive?
years and years of abuse of pills.
And you were seeing all of that as a young kid? I mean, you were exposed to all of
My dad
that?
had a man purse, and it was nothing but prescription bottles.
And your mother used drugs too?
They used to fight about her stealing his drugs.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, my mom's still alive, to answer your question. And as far as I'm aware, I talk to her daily. She's doing
You have
well.
a good relationship with your mother.
I have a good relationship with both of them, despite my raising, my childhood.
Now, when we first spoke, speaking of your childhood, when we first spoke, you mentioned right off the bat, you said the problems all started about age 4 or 5 because you said you were a kleptomaniac and you stole everything in sight. Talk
I don't know
about
if the
that.
problems started at them, but that's my earliest memory of problems. My mom said I was a good child, though. I was very easygoing. You could stick me in a closet and I would find something to do and be self-entertained. Very self-entertaining person. Always have been. And anyways, yeah, I would manipulate the preschool teachers into letting me back into the school while everyone was out in the playground, and on a daily basis, daily. And I would go in there and I would go through everybody's backpacks, the teacher's desk, and just take what I wanted. And I didn't get caught until first grade.
And it was a thrill of doing that?
Oh, it was a major high. It was a major. I didn't know it then. You know what I'm saying? I was just doing. I was 5 years old.
Right.
So I didn't realize it, but now, with my experience, my knowledge, looking back, I can say, okay, that's what I was doing. You know what I'm saying? But Chris is, I spoke to Chris yesterday or day before, and as I shared with him, there was an incident that may have prompted all of this. I'm referring to the first lewd act situation. So
right.
That may have been the door that opened these types of behaviors,
right.
because my mom said I was an excellent child, an easygoing baby
right.
and everything. So how does this 5-year-old all of a sudden decide to start stealing from people and smart enough to manipulate adults?
Right. And we'll get to that in a second. But what was interesting, though, is even at that age, you said you had no conscience about stealing.
Not at all.
Never felt bad if somebody said, "Hey, somebody
I didn't
stole."
even feel bad until probably into my 20s, even though I stopped at one point, which I had shared with you also.
And you stopped at what age? And I believe you said it was because of the consequences. You got caught, or nobody wanted you around, something like that.
By the time I was 13 years old, I had been banned to go back. My whole family's from Philly and Jersey, and my dad was the rogue one. He ran down here chasing his first wife and decided to stay. So I'm a Floridian, but my whole family is from Jersey or Philly on both parents' sides. So anyways, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Repeat your question.
No, it's okay. Well, you know what? Let's talk about your brothers and sisters. You have one sister and 2 additional brothers, right?
Yes.
And you have pretty much a relationship with everybody except the brother that works at Publix.
No, I don't. Yeah, I do have a relationship except for the brother of Publix. You're right. I just don't talk to them. I don't talk to my sister either, actually.
Now, your sister is Daniela.
Yeah, Danielle. Yes.
Now let's go back to what you mentioned before, because this was a big thing in your life.
Mm-hmm.
She was sexually abused for 4 years, and then on 2 occasions, there were lewd sexual acts presented to you as well. Talk about your situation. The first was at age 3, correct?
At age 3.
What happened?
My babysitter's boyfriend, for some reason, he had to drive me home. And when he brought me home, I don't know where my sister was at the time. And I guess we were awaiting my parents to come to my house. My parents never locked the front door, so we just went inside. And he decided to show a 3-year-old what his male genitalia looked like and what it does.
And you were the 3-year-old.
I was 3 years old. He didn't touch me. He just showed me things. And as soon as my father walked in the door, I told him. And my father put me back in the car and drove me back to their house and walked me inside and proceeded to beat the man to half to death.
Wow. And and then nothing ever happened. It's not like the police didn't come.
It was 1985. No.
Right.
Who cares? And plus, look what he did to his daughter.
And what did that do to you in terms of watching your father beat this man half to death?
It scared the hell out of me. Excuse my language. It did. It scared me. I never, later on, which we're going to get into,
right.
That's what I believe fired the situation, fueled the fire of the situation later in life, was because I learned to not tell, because I didn't. A child goes inward. You know what I'm saying? I hurt that man. I did that to that man. I'm not looking at what he did to me. We go inward towards it's what I did to him. So I never want to cause that pain on anybody else ever again. So I'm not going to tell on anybody.
And there was an additional lewd act when you were 10 years old, correct?
Yes.
And what happened on that case?
With the guy who ended up after this molesting my sister for 4 years.
Same guy.
This is not the babysitter's boyfriend when I was 3. This is later in life.
This is Mr. Cook.
Yes, Mr. James Cook. He went by Jim. He was actually like 500 pounds.
Wow.
And when let me say this and then I'll go back. When the case got opened up, there was actually 20 different children that he molested. My sister and I were the only 2 that testified in the end.
So this
Everybody
was the
else
same.
got bought out.
And how did you come across this gentleman?
He was actually my neighbor's twin brother. My neighbor was a pastor of our church, and my neighbor, and he was his twin brother.
So he was sexually abusing your sister. He was sexually abusing your sister for 4 years, and then with you, I think there was one incident where it was a lewd act.
I'm a stronger personality,
right?
And I'm outspoken and outgoing, so. Predators know that type. They know who to pick and know. My sister's a backdoor type person. She's going to sneak out the back door while I'm saying, F you, I'm leaving. That's the type person I am. I don't sneak out windows. I'm just going to go. And but she sneaks out windows. So he chose her as his prey. You know what I'm saying? But he would always try me. He would always, make sexual innuendos or comments. We would drive in the car through McDonald's. Remember, there's 4 kids. 4 of us anyways, and he would buy everybody in their Happy Meals, and I'd be like, well, what about me? He's like, well, you gonna go to the hotel room with me? Wow. He would say, I'd say, I don't want to eat, I'm good.
What happened to him?
He actually died in prison.
How did he get caught? He had this relationship that wasn't a relationship, it was a sexual
it was a very awkward relationship.
Molestation with your sister. How did he ultimately get caught?
He was peeping on my sister while she was making out with her boyfriend. And her boyfriend saw and flipped out, and my sister then confided in him.
And her boyfriend.
And then he went to school the next day and told everybody. So then the school officials got involved. And then from there, my dad tried blackmailing Jim, and my mom found out and then put it in the paper to put everybody on blast.
Wow.
So my sister, there was no discretion at all.
And your sister attempted suicide.
Yes.
Because of that.
Many times throughout the year, especially throughout the years, but throughout that first year, nobody knew it though. She was just oblivious.
I think you said she took an overdose of Xanax, but Xanax alone didn't kill her.
Right. Well, Xanax can't kill you, but yeah.
Okay. All right. So how is your sister now?
As far as I'm aware, she's stable. We don't talk. We had a falling out a few years ago.
Okay.
But as far as I'm aware, she's had another child, and she's stable. She's a manager at a 7-Eleven. She has a car, pays bills. A normal member of society, from what I understand.
Great.
All right, age 13, 14 for you. Now, you really weren't. You had given up stealing because of the consequences that you were facing.
Consequences. I also found other addictions.
Men and drugs.
Yes.
There we go. All right. So at 13, you're living on your own, and you're selling drugs to pay the rent at 13.
Well, I was taking at the time I was on Social Security for a mental health check, and my parents would just my mom. Like I could get to it. I could get into how I ended up in the mobile home by myself, but I would take the check and I would flip it. I would re-up with it.
You would buy drugs and then you would sell the drugs.
Right.
And then
to make more money.
And then you made more money.
Yeah.
All right. Now at this point, I believe at this point in time too, your father hadn't passed away yet.
No.
And you got into it with your father. He took a swing at you when your mother had him put in jail, correct? Mm-hmm. And you were
I was on probation. Yeah.
You were on probation. What happened then?
I was 13 years old. This is prior to me, just before me ending up to live on my own. My dad went to swing on me, and I drew back. And I stood my ground, and I told him, if you're going to hit me, I'm going to hit you back this time. The argument was because I would not wear shorts to school. He wanted me to wear shorts.
And that's what the whole argument was
about. Remember, my dad had a rage disorder.
Right.
So he flipped and went to go get a 10-pound trick skateboard of my brother's, which is a very heavy skateboard. It's meant for tricks. Anyways, I said that. Anyways, I ran out the front door. That was my go-to
He was going to hit you with it?
Oh, yes, if he could catch me. But I learned to get the front door fast.
Right.
Many years of experience. So anyways, my mom then, I guess, followed him outside because he grabbed the phone. I was going to say cell phone. It was a portable phone. Anyways, to call my probation officer to violate me. And my mom somehow got the phone away from him, called 911. He attacked her, and he went to jail. And that was how I ended up with my mom, and then that was how I ended up on my own.
And at this point in time, you were what they call an emo kid. You dressed in black, kind of. Is that like goth?
No. Goth is like a emo kid. I hate to say it. I hate
and you were cutting yourself.
Emotional. I was a very emotional, dark, depressed child.
And you were cutting yourself.
Yes, I was hurting myself.
Where were you cutting yourself?
On my arms.
So
it was superficial. It wasn't a suicide.
Right.
I mean, there was suicide attempts, but the cutting was not suicidal, and it was not attention seeking either, because I wouldn't let anybody know I was doing it. I would cut. That's one of the reasons why my dad wanted me to wear shorts that day.
Gotcha.
Was because even though I never cut my legs, he wanted to keep an eye on my body parts because he didn't know what I was doing to myself or when I was doing it.
Gotcha.
So.
All right, 1992. You have such an interesting story, and we have so much ground to cover. 1992. You're in 8th grade. 13, 14 years old.
No, it wasn't 1992. It was 1995.
1995?
Yes.
Okay, but you're in 8th grade at Lake Gibson Middle School in Lakeland, and you're expelled for distribution of controlled substance.
Sales and distribution.
Talk about that.
I was selling my dad's pills to one of my, I guess it was my boyfriend at the time's mother. Jesse was his name. Anyways, and one of the girls in school who happened to be the vice principal's daughter wanted a pen in my backpack. Remember, I'm a klepto. So I have like 500 pens, and she happened to get the one pen that had the pills inside of it. And she wanted some.
And what kind of pills were they?
They were Ambien.
Ambien.
I told her not to take them at school, and I gave her one. Of course, she took it at school. Ambien is a sleeping medication, so she just wanted to go to bed. But the school overreacted, and they called the ambulance because she couldn't stay conscious. And they flipped out, and then it turned into this whole thing, and I ended up getting expelled and put on probation for it.
So you were out of school in 8th grade. You're put on probation. Did you ever go back to school again after
I went to the opportunity school and the drug school, the Mark Wilcox and the Polk Opportunity.
Okay.
I went there off and on for a year until I finally just dropped out. Like, it was just no point of going.
Right. So you dropped out of there. Right. You dropped out, but you were still on probation, and that caught up with you, correct?
Yeah, because I was actually on probation, and I was on it for 1 year, and I completed it. But my probation officer retired and never put the paperwork in. So I got lost in the system unbeknownst at this time. I'm thinking I'm just off probation. So now fast forward 2-3 years later, I'm living in the #1 gang house in Lakeland. I'm not going to school. I'm running with a really rough crowd. I'm selling drugs. So my mom gets this great idea. She tells me she's going to pick me up, take me for a depot shot. I'm all for that. I'm 15 years old. I don't want to get pregnant. So anyway, she takes me to all I know is I walked in the door and the door's locked behind me.
Wow.
So I started throwing chairs and I went crazy. It was some sort of like rehab facility. Anyways, they held me for 3 days and they released me because when they drug tested me, don't know how, I passed. Don't know how.
But it was a 3-day kind of a program,
and
then you would go to a 7-day school, correct?
Exactly, that's what I'm going into. So when I got released from there, That sent me into, it opened the door to send me to a 7-day drug school where I would be in school. They pick you up at 4:30 in the morning on the side of the road. You have no idea how many times guys tried picking me up. Anyways, I'm on the side of Highway 98 North on Lakeland at 4:30 in the morning awaiting a bus. You ride the bus for 3 hours. It goes all over the county. Polk County is a pretty big county. It goes all over the county, and then it takes you to school by 7:30, 8 o'clock-ish.
But wait a second here. Let me stop you for a second. But along the way, some police officer,
that's what I'm going to tell you.
He notices your maiden name, Capodici, and what happens?
So we walk into orientation, and of course, like you said, he heard my name, Capodici, and he recognized it. So he went back to his office, and just coincidentally, my file was somewhere in his shuffle of paperwork, and he found it and immediately put a warrant out for my arrest. So I went on the run.
On the run.
Yeah, I was.
And what was he arresting you?
Technical.
I
was on probation.
She was on probation and she left.
Okay.
All right. Now you're on the run, and your first husband to be, not your husband yet, this guy named Brad, he convinces you to turn yourself in.
Yes.
What happened?
He says we can't move forward until you clear the slate.
Now you're 16 years old.
No, I'm still 15 at the time.
Okay.
So he talked me into turning myself in, and when I did that, I got out and I was on house arrest, pending my release of probation. Okay. I was waiting a court date. Anyways, my dad was in the hospital with gangrene. We had 2 litters of cats, 2 litters of dogs, and 3 children I was taking care of.
So not much going on.
So I was not going to school. My probation officer was tolerating that, but Jim kept trying to come to the house, the guy that was molesting my sister. I would not let him in the house. So he called my probation officer up and told him that I was going to the mall and all this stuff, and they came and violated me, picked me up, and put me before the judge, and I failed for a drug test.
And so they sent you to the boot camp in Polk County.
They sent me from level 0 to level 9 for a failed drug test.
And you were at that boot camp for a year and a half in Polk County.
What was that? An awesome experience.
What was that like?
It was an awesome. I can't believe that most people would never say that. To me, it was an awesome experience. They break you down and they build you up, is what the concept is. It's a very harsh program. But if you don't have mental capacity and will, you know what I'm saying? Of course it's going to be hard. But if you have those things, in fortitude, you can get through it and come above it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
I got my GED in there. I came out a bigger, better person because of it.
What
it was an excellent experience.
What was you say they broke you down? Give us examples of how they did that.
You're not allowed to make eye contact at all. You're a maggot. You're nothing. You're not even allowed to say your name. You are a recruit. Ma'am, good morning, ma'am. Ma'am, recruit Capodici request permission to speak, ma'am.
So how did they like at the end of the boot camp? How would you say you were different?
I was stronger physically for one. There's a lot of rack drills, running involved. I got back into school. I had not been in school for 3 years at that point. I studied for 6 months. And when I went to take my GED, I scored 4 points shy of a 4-year college scholarship.
Okay, that's fantastic.
I wanted to retake the test. They don't let you.
All right, let's jump ahead here because now we're going to enter a phase in your life that was a very volatile phase here. Looks like between age 17 and age 30 was dominated by drugs, cocaine, alcohol, and a lot of turmoil in your life. You got out of the boot camp and you got married to Brad.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
About a year later, by the time I was 18, we got married August 5th, and I found out I was pregnant. I found out I was pregnant 3 days prior to that. We got married by August 5th. My 18th birthday was August 28th.
But you said you and Brad were bad parents. You were selfish. How so?
We were not ready to be parents at all. We were both very selfish. We were involved in each other's emotions. We were involved in our own emotions. We were on drugs.
What drugs were you using, both of you?
We were both using meth and cocaine and alcohol.
All right.
Extreme amounts of it.
And your daughter was born, Olivia Marie, in 2001.
No. Oh, yes, 2001. I'm sorry.
She's 20 years old now.
Yes.
Now, you haven't spoken to her since she was 7 years old. Talk about that.
I've been in and out of Olivia's life from the time that she was 1 year old. So her paternal grandmother, Cindy Bunch, took custody of her. And when I was on drugs and alcohol and I was partying, I would be out of her life. And then I would come back in her life, and I would stabilize, and I'd be a good mom, and I'd be there for her, and then something would happen, and I'd fall off again. And this happened 2 or 3 times by the time she was 7 years old. And the last time it hurt her, I guess, so much they moved, and they moved her to Illinois. And when I found out, I had their house robbed.
Right. Yeah, you're jumping ahead. We're going to get there. We're going to get there.
So,
Now, but what's interesting is that you haven't had contact with her. You said she's a Facebook friend, but you don't like anything. You don't want her to know you're looking, and you're just kind of observing her because you feel you don't deserve to contact her.
it's not so much that I don't deserve to contact her. It's that I don't want to disrupt her.
Okay.
I don't know. I know that what her contacting me could do to me, especially if I got rejection. Like I'm choking up now.
It's okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like if she were to call me up just to tell me she hates me, that would destroy me, even though I totally think I deserve it. It would destroy me just to hear it.
I understand. Yeah.
What would me entering her life do to her? And I don't want to disrupt that. You know what I'm saying? I see a lot of myself in her already, and that could be a good and a bad thing. So,
but she has a stable life now,
yeah,
and she's in school.
She's in college. She's married, and she has a job. She lives in St. Louis now, actually. She has her own apartment.
Oh, it's nice.
She's doing awesome. So why, if it's not broken, don't fix it.
So you divorced Brad.
Yes.
You divorced
1 year later.
1 year later. You meet Andy, 25 years you were senior. Talk about
my marriage.
I'm sorry, that?
Best part of my marriage.
The divorce.
The divorce.
I'm sorry, I forgot that. You said, right, when I asked you if you divorced Brad, you said, yes, that was the best part of your marriage.
Yeah, absolutely.
So then you meet Andy, who's 25 years your senior.
Yes.
Talk about that.
Yes.
Were drugs involved?
Absolutely. Andy actually was a drug dealer, and that's how I ended up at his house. I was with a couple of guys. Actually, my third child's father I was with at the time, but he wasn't, like, we weren't together at the time. We were just hanging out. Anyways, they went to, I was passed out in the back of the car, and okay, sorry.
It's okay.
I was passed out in the back of the car, and they kept talking about this crazy girl, and finally Andy put it together that the girl was in the back of the car. So he picked me up and brought me in his house, and when I woke up, like, we kind of like got together,
Right.
and I never left for 4 years. I literally walked out in the living room and looked at Steve, which was the other guy, and told him I'm going to stay with him.
And you had a son.
Guy.
Right. You had Guy Scott, was born in 2004.
Christmas Eve, yes.
He's 16 years old now?
17.
And you actually took him to Legoland a few years ago, correct?
No, that was Mikhail.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry. Okay, when was the last time you saw Guy Scott?
He was like 4.
When he was 4? And
his dad doesn't let me. He dangles him in front of me.
Why did that?
But he's with his dad now.
Yeah, he's been with his dad. Yeah.
Why did that relationship end? What happened?
Andy is a terrible person to be with. Like, he's a great father. I'm sorry. It's so difficult to explain, because it's like, how could you leave your child with somebody who's so horrible? Because I haven't painted a picture for you. I was not allowed to look sideways while we were driving down the side of the road. I was not allowed to wear makeup. I was not allowed to dye my hair. I was not allowed to shave. He knew how much gas it took to get to, when I was pregnant, to get to my prenatal doctor. If there was more than a quarter of a mile over the tank or the mileage, we would fight. He was a very, very volatile, very, very controlling, abusive person. I was a dog on a leash when I was with him. I had no identity. I lost myself. He was 25 years my senior. Somebody that old was someone that young. I am very broken inside.
Right.
He took advantage of that.
And he could control you.
Absolutely. I was all him.
How did you get out of that relationship?
My Brad's mom told me, and she told me this like a year. It took me a year for it to happen, by the way. She told me that if I left him, she would give me a paycheck once a week, a car, a cell phone, a place to live, stable housing, and all I had to do was go to college and take care of my kids and become an RN. That's what she wanted for me. And when I was done, she would buy me a house. I didn't tell you that, by the way. She
Right.
would
Well,
buy me a
no.
house upon graduation.
Well, you told me she was right. She enticed you to leave this guy, but then did that ever? You ultimately left him, and did she come through on what she said she would do?
She came through on. Well, obviously, I did not come through.
Okay.
So she came through all the way up into the point to where I destroyed everything, and I never earned that house. So I never went to. I never finished college. I ended up on cocaine and alcohol really bad.
Exactly, and that's where we're going right now because
Yeah.
we're almost up to when you had her house robbed. 2005, 2006, very rough years. You had ended this relationship with Andy, I believe. 2 alcohol poisonings.
Walked in with Steve.
You right, but 2 alcohol poisonings that ended you up in the hospital.
With
correct?
Steve. Yeah, I was with Steve.
You
during
were
that
with
time.
a guy named Steve at that. You were already with Steve?
So how I met Andy was through Steve, and that was 4 years. And then 4 years, flash forward 4 years later, after Andy and I broke up, Steve happened to get out of prison, and I happened to run into him in a cash and carry. And then he started stalking me, and then he became my pizza man.
Okay.
And then I
And Steve had been to prison 8 times, correct?
yeah, well, not that time. It was like 5 or 6 at that time.
Which is very interesting because one of the things that we talk about in your story was that, and I'm jumping ahead this time, is that guys in relationships have been your Achilles heel and your codependency,
Relationships. Yeah.
drugs, and you seem to be drawn to these bad boys. Most of them have been arrested or in prison. Have you ever thought about
Volatile.
why?
Well, I mean, look at my dad. I mean, definitely. My male role model was a volatile drug dealer / photographer who was very promiscuous. But that's ironically, that's one thing I don't tolerate. I may be abused. I may, you can do a lot of things to me, but I do not tolerate.
Right, but don't cheat on you.
Right, don't cheat on me because that's like, forget it.
So jump back to these. You had 2 alcohol poisonings, and I believe you actually flatlined once. I think there was a suicide attempt, correct?
Yeah, actually, that was at the beginning of Brad and I's divorce, like right before we filed for paperwork. Brad threw me off the porch, and I just lost it because I didn't want to be with him. Brad would do things to me, even though I would say no, and I just couldn't take it anymore. And I went to my dad's apartment and I army crawled into his house and I got into his man purse, by the way, of his prescription pills. 20 years later, still has a Merce.
Yeah.
And I took out 2 bottles and I just happened to grab Xanax and Somas. Xanax is not deadly. You can eat 1,000 Xanax. You'll get very, very messed up, but you will not die. The moment you mix Xanax with anything, it immediately becomes lethal. Rule of thumb.
Now you had a child with Stephen, Mikhail. He was born in November of 2008. Talk about that.
I actually had Mikhail. I was pregnant in jail most of the time, and I had Mikhail. I got sent to Susan B. Anthony 3 weeks before I had him. That's my second time in Susan B. Anthony. The first time, well, hold on. How I ended up pregnant in jail was I ended up robbing my ex-mother-in-law's house, the house that my daughter lived in, because I found out that they moved her to Illinois.
Yeah, let's jump back there. 2008. You orchestrated a break-in. I guess she moved your daughter, Olivia. She moved her daughter up north and never told you.
Right.
So you orchestrated a robbery of her home.
I had Steve rob it. Yeah.
You had you and Steve, you organized it and Steve robbed it. But then you got convicted. But you avoided prison time if you gave up custody of your daughter. Correct?
No, they already had custody. No, they already had custody of my daughter, full custody.
How did you avoid prison time?
My mother-in-law's a God-fearing woman, and I guess she still loves me in her heart. You know what I'm saying? Because it was all her.
Okay.
The state would not move forward without her blessing. You have to understand, this woman is a woman of power. She's a multimillionaire. She owns a Fortune 500 company. She's Chamber of Commerce in the city. So
She didn't want you to go to prison,
No,
and you
she
didn't go to
didn't.
prison.
Right.
Well, okay, that was
it
good.
was a blessing.
Have you ever reconnected with her?
Actually, when my daughter sent me a Facebook request back in 2012, I Facebook sending it immediately and asked permission if it was okay if I accepted, because I mean I'm so sorry for what I did to their house. You know what I'm saying? Like, I wish I could undo that. I was on meth at the time. It doesn't excuse it, but I never want to step on her toes again. So
Yeah, because
very, very respectful.
She took care of your daughter.
Yeah.
No,
I
she's
mean-
done a lot more than that.
Yeah.
I've costed that woman $2 million, easy.
So this guy, all right. So you have Mikhail with Steve. Now, I guess Steve violates probation, and he takes your son Mikhail, and he's on the run, and he takes Mikhail to California.
Well,
but you were in prison at the time,
right? I had Mikhail right after Mikhail's first birthday. I got caught up in a check ring. I was back on meth. I got out Susan B. Anthony in August. 4 months later, I got out Susan B. Anthony in August, and against everyone's advice, I went back to Polk County. I should have stayed down here. But I didn't do that, and I left my support groups and everything, and I moved up there, old people, places, and things, and got caught up within 4 months.
That was when you got caught up in that check ring doing what's called busting.
Yes.
Explain busting. You
we
taught me about that.
We were printing payroll checks, and we were cashing them.
So you were creating checks that looked like payroll checks, and then you would
we were buying account numbers and stuff.
And then you would So I mean,
you go to like a local vendor, like a mom and pop shop, and you probably can't do it now because of people like me. But anyways, you could back then go to a local place to do like a check cashing place, not a bank, but a local place, and they can't check it immediately in the system. So as long as they've never cashed that check there before, you can go there and cash the check. You know what I'm saying? And they won't know until they go to cash it.
How long were you doing that?
Like 4 months.
You were doing crystal meth at this time?
We were cooking it.
How did you get caught?
I actually went to go bust a check, and we had already been there twice that day, and I think because we were high, we forgot, and it just ended up really bad. The guy ended up with an altercation. The cops ended up chasing us, and the guy that I was with was an informant, so they took me instead of him.
We see that so often. So many people tell us they go to prison because somebody, you know.
And he was the dealer. He was the one
they
doing
turn
the
them in so that they don't get charged on a crime. We see that so often.
I was the small fry in that situation, but I didn't know it at the time.
So now, for the very first time, you're going to prison. You go to Lowell Correctional Institution for Women, correct?
The Restitution Center, yes.
And you were there for over 2 years.
Yeah, I stayed there. I actually got really good at manipulating to make sure I stayed there. I kept a hold on me at all times.
Were you scared? You went to prison.
No.
For some reason, I didn't think you were scared.
No, not at all.
What was that like?
I'm going to say this very cautiously. It was too easy for me. I'm naturally an institutionalized person.
So when you say easy, why was prison easy for you?
It was easy. I can conform to it easy. I can get into the underground stuff easy. I don't do drama, so I don't do like the whole dating, and I didn't get into the drug scene because I tried, and I ended up getting bapped, which means you got like fake stuff by a midget. I can't fight a midget on the yard, so
it just doesn't look good.
Nope. Yeah,
so what happened? You went to buy some marijuana, and it turned out to be oregano or something?
Or tea leaves or something.
So you just said, well,
yeah,
all right.
Just whatever. Just, I'll just live. And you asked me, actually, was there ever a period of time if you were ever sober? And I'm like, yeah, there's many times. Well, that was 27 months right there.
Right.
So prison was an awesome experience. It was a learning experience. Most people backpack across Europe. I went to prison. But I met a lot of really cool, interesting people. God put some really cool people in my path in my life. I've met some awesome people, John being one of them. I met a pianist in there, and she could have been lying through her teeth, but I believed her. And she was a Chinese woman, and she was in there on some very strange charges. And I believed her based on how her stature was, how she carried herself, how she expected people to, she demanded respect. She didn't carry herself like she was in prison. She carried herself like a woman who had a degree and came from something, you know what I'm saying, and had something to offer. It was just she didn't fit in. So anyway, she helped me kind of hone my artistic skills. You know what I'm saying? I started drawing again and writing poetry again, and I went inward.
I volunteered at a men's correctional institution for 13, 14 years. And so many times I hear men and women say they'll never work at a women's correctional institution. Why do they say that?
Because it takes the women 45 minutes to line up for chow. Button up your shirt, tighten it up, get in line, stop talking, don't smoke. This is when they were still smoking in the prisons, by the way.
Right, there's
no
smoking
anymore. I made a killing
anymore.
when they got rid of the smoking, though. I made a killing.
How?
Because I was, I got in a DR and got kicked off a wheelchair pushing.
DR is a delinquency report?
Yes.
Okay.
For doing tattoos. I
wow.
was doing tattoos, but they caught me because I did my own. It was my father's death date and his birth date, and they saw like it was still fresh. So, anyways, they thought someone else was doing it, and I just wouldn't rat them out, but it was actually me. So
Well, what they tell us at a men's prison is if one guy has a problem with another, there's a fight, there's violence, and it's over. But it's different in a female or a women's
they're
institution.
catty, you know what I'm saying? They're more likely to cut you up or steal your stuff or sleep with your. I didn't have a girlfriend, but other people would have sleep with their girlfriends. You know what I'm saying? They're very malicious and catty, and they jab you from the side instead of punch you in the face. And it's just nitpicky, and they don't have respect. And women are not clean. I was in a very clean dorm. I was very blessed, but women are not clean.
Talk about your dorm. 83 women in one big kind of a
room.
cage?
No, it's a room.
It's a room.
It's a room
with 83 bunks.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And I was very fortunate. Well, hold on, that's at Lowell. So like the other camps are very different. You know what I'm saying? They have like little like cottages, but they don't have AC. I wanted to stay at the reception center because we had AC. And I'm not going anywhere with that AC.
Now, one issue you had is because you speak well. A lot of women didn't like you, correct?
No, I've actually had this issue throughout. I've been in a lot of like drug programs, facilities. Like I said, I'm naturally institutionalized. So anyways, I've been through a lot of things, or just people in the streets in general. But anyways, because I speak clearly and I speak with certainty, and I'm articulate, I intimidate women. I make them feel like less for themselves for some reason. They have self-esteem issues. Anyway, so they would have a real disdain for me because of the way I spoke or I carried myself.
Now, you were paroled in 2012. No,
No,
you were released. That was my question. You were released in 2012. So you're not subjected to parole?
No.
Are you
simple charges?
Are you subjected to anything? Your analysis?
I went straight to the door. I did my time straight to the door.
And you're out the door.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't go home this time. I didn't go back to Polk County. I got a bus ticket straight down here. I didn't know anybody and went straight into a halfway house and
in
figured it
Pompano
out.
Beach?
So it was just the bad influences up there? I mean, the people you were
I got
hanging...
trouble down here too, and I found meth. Don't worry. That's what I thought.
I just real quickly, you mentioned earlier, God brought people into your life. Are you a spiritual person?
Very, very.
Okay.
Spiritual, yes. I believe strongly in energy, in a greater entity. And I believe that it works through people and through kindness.
And you think that's one of the things that maybe has kept you alive to this point? Because
Absolutely.
you've been in a lot of hairy situations.
I have flatlined twice at this point. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I should not be here on many occasions. I am a very, very grateful person, and I'm only here by the grace of God. There's no coincidence. There's no coincidence. This person happened to be here at this time while I was seizing and just knew exactly what to do to get me to the hospital and save my life. I don't believe it's coincidence.
That's divine intervention to you.
Exactly.
You just told Andy, you found meth down here. All right, you said you found meth down here. When was the last time you used crystal meth?
My son turned 6 on Tuesday, and I'm sorry, I don't want to be brutally honest, but I don't want to lie to you, and so I didn't know I was pregnant with this last child,
right?
So 4 months into the pregnancy, I was using
so about 7
very
years.
heavily.
So that was about 7 years ago.
Yeah, because
Okay.
at that time I was supplying probably a third of Broward County's meth.
Wow.
Was there repercussions to your son?
My son has a speech delay. He's ADHD. He's bipolar. And he has social issues. So he's in very intense therapies, and he has an IEP in school and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know if those are the consequences that came along with it, but I will definitely hold that shame and think it is.
So in 2013, you met Kevin's father, Kevin, and you've been together for 7 years, correct? Mm-hmm. All right.
Minus his incarceration times.
How did you meet Kevin?
I was actually on a binge, I guess you would say. It was my birthday, and my friend said, "Kacey, let me show you how we do it in Broward County." And it lasted like 7 days. Anyways, at the end of it, some guy that she was like messing around with. He was a coke dealer, and I guess he ran out and he needed to re-up. And he said, listen, I got to re-up, but I really want to bring you with me, and I want to introduce you to this guy because I think you two will really, because you have a lot of the things that he wants, because I was selling at the time too. You have a lot of the things that I think he'll want and find interest, and he has some stuff you might like too. So Kevin and I met, and we courted for like 6 months, 8 months, something like that. Like, we were friends, we talk, we hang out, and we didn't actually get together until February of the following year, and it was kind of like a business deal. Like, we wanted to make an enterprise, so to speak. Like,
gotcha.
That's how it happened.
So you were, once again, you were also drawn to, as you said, well, as I say, kind of the bad boy persona. Now, he's never been to prison, but he's been to what you call 364, means 364 days in county lockup on a couple of occasions, correct?
Like 4 or 5, and then he's done 2 or 3 month stints here and there.
All right. And your son Kevin, he just had his birthday, and what grade of school is he in?
Tuesday, and he'll be going into kindergarten. I mean, I'm going into first grade next year.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, you know, it's funny. You mentioned John. We've got about 10 minutes to go. So you mentioned John Eddings earlier. John actually is a great man who I met a number of years ago, and he runs the Anchor House, Halfway House in I believe Lake Worth. Talk about the positive influence that John Eddings has had on your life.
John is another one of those people that God put in my life. Let me start with how I met John. That's a divine intervention moment for you. So I was living at Salvation Army, just out of Susan B. Anthony, and I had just lost my 4th job. And you have to maintain. Salvation Army is like a housing thing that helps people get on their feet, save money. It's a subsidized housing. So anyways, and there's rules there. You have to maintain employment. I lost my 4th job, and I thought I was going to get kicked out of there, even though I wasn't, but I thought I was. So anyways, I was like, F it. So I had like 20 some odd dollars cash, and I was like, I'm going to go buy some alcohol. I can't deal with this anymore. That's one of the things you don't do there. You cannot use alcohol or drugs. You will get kicked out. So I was risking everything doing that, and people will tell on you. So anyways, I was walking to Publix, which is like straight down the street. And right before I hit the main road, I looked to my right, and there's a garage sale there. I love garage sales. I'm a trash picker all day long. You have no idea the stuff we get out of the trash. Anyways, and I looked over, and I went over to the garage sale, and I found, how many Curious George DVDs was there? Like 43? Something like that. Anyways, there was a stack of Curious George DVDs. I spent all my money on the Curious George DVDs that I was going to buy with the alcohol for my son. And I couldn't carry everything to the store. So, because I still had to go to the store and get groceries, diapers, stuff like that. So, anyways, on my way home, I gave John my phone number. And I said, I'll call you on my way home, and I can either grab it or you can bring it to me or whatever you want to do. Well, giving John my phone number, he didn't realize it was just a one-time thing. So he kept calling me, he would find an excuse. Oh, I found a few more DVDs or whatever. And then finally, when he went to bring over the excess DVDs, he asked me out for coffee. And I made like a sly comment. I got you. I made a sly comment about how I had been to prison. Like, oh, I guess it's not as bad as the prison coffee. You know what I'm saying? Let him know.
Right, you let him know that
that I had been to prison.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And most people, that's a really good. When I share people that I've been to prison, and I gauge how they respond. It's a really good way to learn a lot about people and their response to that to those statements. So John's response, there wasn't one. He wasn't even set back.
Right.
I was like, okay, this guy's a stalker. So, anyways.
Yes, he is.
But of course, I don't run.
Yes, he is. Yeah.
But of course, me and my dynamics, I didn't run. I went for coffee.
Kacey, if you could stand in a room with 30 or 40 young ladies that used to be you and give them advice on how to live their lives, or what advice would you give them so they wouldn't make the same mistakes you've made?
Love yourself.
I think you said love. You got to love yourself before you can love others. Talk about that.
First off, if you can't love yourself, you're not capable of loving anyone else. Plus, no one else is going to love you. You're going to end up in the same volatile relationships trying to find love. You don't need to find it. It's already within you. And if you find that, then you don't need anything else, and the good things will come to you.
And I think you also mentioned that the secret to life is balance. Even drug use, you said.
Well, I would never say that in a room of teenagers. Let me state that. But
Right.
I did say that. Yes, everything in moderation, everything in balance. If you do too much, if you use too much toilet paper, it's going to have consequences. You know what I'm saying? You take too much vitamins, there's going to be negative consequences. If you take too little vitamins, there's going to be negative consequences. Everything is about that middle ground. And I really believe in the pursuit of happiness. That is nirvana, is when you achieve balance. And that is the hardest thing to do. Can you maintain balance in every aspect of your life?
Have you maintained balance?
Absolutely not. I'm terrible.
Are
at
you
it.
getting
I'm in
better at?
therapy.
Are you getting better at it?
Yes.
Were you ever considered an alcoholic? Like,
Yeah.
do you go to?
I am an alcoholic.
So you don't drink any alcohol now?
No. I just lost my taste for it. I don't go to AA or anything like that.
Okay.
I am full support of it though. I did do that. And it worked for me at the time. I needed it, and then I just kind of like phased out of it. But no, I don't drink. And if I feel like I need to, I will go to a meeting. Like, I don't mind.
And I think one of the issues you had told me it was that that you struggle with is the contact with. You have 4 children. So how do you deal with that? Because I think you have
4 children, but I only have one, and I'm only in one life.
You're in one life.
I only have one in my life.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And in terms of the guise of relationships and being your Achilles heel, how have you come to deal with that in your life?
God has blessed me with an awesome partner. I finally found someone who can appreciate me, and I can appreciate them, and we can love healthy with health. You know what I'm saying? Like, how I'm choking up. I'm sorry. Kevin is an amazing man, an amazing father, and I'm so grateful, because he was not when we first got together. I don't know if...
But people can change, right?
No, it was already there, and I knew that. It was already there. We were just on drugs and selling drugs and leading a terrible lifestyle. And once we had our son, we were able to shine.
Kacey, thank you so much. You were a fantastic guest. I hope you'll come back. You know, I was very fortunate to have met you about a week and a half ago.
By chance, divine intervention.
By chance, and you overheard something I was saying, and you offered very insightful dialogue to it. And I said, we've got to put her on the show. And it was just such a pleasure to meet you. And thank you so much. Andy, final comments?
Nice meeting you.
Yeah, it was great meeting Kacey. I mean, what a resilient person she is. I mean, going through all these obstacles in her life from a very young age, from the time she was basically born on, it's been one tumultuous thing after another, and you're incredibly resilient. God bless you, and I hope your life continues to go in a positive direction.
Me too, and same to you.
Thank you.
Well, that does it for today, and thank you all so much for tuning in for another episode of Men Going Home here at the station at the Man Live in Miami. And a very special thank you to Dr. Regina Sheeran, David Goodwin, and John Eddings. Thank you all so much for supporting this show, and thank you all so much for watching. See you next week here on Men Going Home.